We are back, ladies and gentlemen. It's Scotland, it's 1 p.m, and that means that we're back in original form, the legible, credible, inevitable storm, which is a force for good, coming to you live from our nerve centre here in the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConaughey. And people will say, Alistair, why are you wanting to move to mainly broadcasting on YouTube rather than Facebook? Well, very simple reason. If we can get our subscribers up to over 1,000, and if we can get 4,000 hours of viewing on YouTube, then we will become eligible for monetization, which means that this channel will be able to earn an income for the cause. That's not possible via Facebook Lives. It is possible via YouTube. So if we can move to people watching on YouTube, then that's good for the cause. And it's also actually better for the quality of the broadcast as well, which is slightly higher on YouTube than it is on Facebook. So that's the reason, is there's a good strategic reason behind it to get our YouTube subscriptions up. You can watch, of course, as I've said, without having a YouTube account. But if you want to comment specifically on YouTube, and I see people are already watching and commenting, good afternoon to you, Thomas, on YouTube. Good afternoon to Richard. Mike sounds good. He says, no problems. Leslie says, good afternoon. Angus, hello, everyone. And Mowina, yes, good, clear pic and sound here. That's fantastic to know. So if you want to comment on YouTube, you can get yourself a YouTube account by simply clicking on the say something there, and it will come up and it will probably say create channel, which simply means create an account for yourself. And you just follow the process, and it will take a couple of minutes, and then you'll be able to comment either in the live chat or in the comments directly below the video. So thank you for that. And we should also just be on Facebook as well. So good. Okay, well, folks, this Thursday past, I want to say a big thank you to the 18 of us, the 18 AFFG supporters, the Thin Red Line, who came out and stood at the BBC studios, stood up to the SNP Scottish Nationalist demonstration, which was being held there. Now, that was being held because the BBC had said that they were going to remove Nicola Sturgeon from her daily 1 hour show, the Watch with Mother Sturgeon show, which the BBC had been putting on for her, basically giving her a huge national platform almost every day for about the last 6 months. And of course, many of us saw the extreme dangers of that politically. And so various politicians had been putting pressure upon the BBC, and they did decide to drop her from the main BBC channel. And they said that they were going to continue to screen it on the BBC, the smaller BBC channel that they have. But this was not good enough for the Scottish Nationalists, and they demonstrated. They had a static demonstration, and they had about 75 to 80 people outside the BBC studios in Pacific Quay. Well, we knew we had to be there because we had to give the message that we're tired of the Jackanory story being broadcast on national television every single morning. We are tired of the Nicola Sturgeon show, even though the Scottish Nationalists, of course, love it because they get to adorate the Nicola for an hour every day. So we went along. We were very colourful, 18 of us, great gang of folk. Thank you very much to every member of the Thin Red Line who came out at short notice, it should be said. And thank you also to the to the police and the authorities there for making sure everything went very smoothly on all sides. And we were there for half an hour, and we Facebook lived it. We've had about 16,000 views on that particular video. And our message was threefold. Firstly, our message was switch off Sturgeon. Please switch off Sturgeon, because there's only so much we can take of this, quite frankly. And we're tired of this show, which we've been subjected to for 6 months. And it was well past time, we argued, for that show to be cancelled off the air. And importantly, if she had anything really important to say, then she, as First Minister, should say that in Holyrood. And in Holyrood, she would get a chance to be quizzed by her peers, by the other MSPs. That's the way that it should be. Thank you to everybody watching on YouTube. David says, good afternoon from sunny Edinburgh. Michael says, good afternoon. Marjorie's watching from Arran, and Dorothea from County Tyrone. And Henry, she's on the BBC News as well, getting coverage worldwide. Indeed, indeed. Dorothea says, switch off Sturgeon is a great slogan. Thank you. So yeah, she should be saying these things in the Holyrood Parliament, not saying them without being properly quizzed. So we made that point. We also made the point to the BBC to stop, to realise the power that it has, and to stop its constant alarmism, especially over the question of cases. And we pointed out the extent to which a case is not correctly named. What it simply means is a test by which a person has shown that they have developed antibodies to the COVID, which is actually a very good thing, because it shows that their body has produced an immune response. Now, that's the way that it's meant to work. That's not really a sign of danger. It does not mean that the person has got ill from COVID or that they're going to get ill from COVID. It simply means that their body has been exposed to the virus and has developed an immune response. So that's a good thing. When the BBC talk about cases, and when Nicola Sturgeon talks about cases, and indeed when the entire British government talk about cases, they make it look like these are cases that are going into hospital. These are not. These are just simply positive tests for the antibody which has been found, which tends to suggest that herd immunity is growing, which can only be a good thing. So that we pointed out to the BBC to stop that confusion, to stop that alarmism and that scaremongering. And thirdly, of course, we put in a good word for the United Kingdom. We put in a good word for the United Kingdom. We told them that we're British, we love the UK, and we want to stay together. And we said to the BBC that if they have trouble filling that hour, then why don't they put on some good unionists? We'll happily stand there for an hour. And instead of what she talks about, and instead of what she's implying, we will be speaking about solidarity and unity, and will not be promoting essentially the divisive separation, which is her party's position. So we said that the BBC they owe us grassroots unionists for subjecting us to Nicola Sturgeon for 6 months. They owe us something. So come on, guys, BBC. Well, that was all very well and good until we basically went back to the office, looked at the internet, and discovered that, in fact, the BBC had climbed down. The BBC had climbed down, not because of the SNP, Scottish Nationalist demonstration that day, but simply because the BBC is clearly scared of the power of the Scottish National Party in Scotland. Whether that's for whatever reasons, we can only speculate, but there's no reason for them to have climbed down in that manner. However, they have said in a report this morning, they've said in future, even though they're going to continue to show the Nicola Sturgeon Watch with Mother Sturgeon show, they're going to, quote, incorporate other voices and other perspectives involving politicians from across the political spectrum, as well as commentators, analysts, and other experts. So there looks like they might try to bring in an alternative point of view on that sort of thing. So maybe there's some hope there. Maybe there's some hope, but it was certainly important for us to get out there and fly the flag and show the fact that we exist. Because literally, if we did not do that, people would watch and see these things and would not be aware that really grassroots unionism exists in Scotland. So we have to keep holding the British end up, as we always say. And interestingly, the organizer of that SNP, Scottish Nationalist rally, he was quoted in the National yesterday saying about us, about a force for good. He said, I kind of thank the counter-protesters for turning up because they make it and give it an energy with the conflict that's part of the independence campaign. So for them, we make it and we give an energy, which they seem to be grateful for. So, well, you're very welcome, guys. You're very welcome. But we have to keep giving. We have to keep giving that energy. We have to keep giving that energy and we have to keep making it. And that's what we're about here at A Force for Good. Because otherwise people will forget. People will forget that the United Kingdom even exists in the first place. So yeah, what we are going to, that was an important thing that we did. And if you go onto our Facebook page, you'll see the live video that we filmed. And it's really quite good. It's really quite exciting. And if you want to be part of those things, then we need to firstly know who you are, really. So we need to have developed a relationship with you. So, you know, you can sign up as a supporter with your email. You can become a donator, or you can contact us, contact our Facebook or our website or our email, which is contact@aforceforgood.uk, and say that you would like to be considered to come out. And then we'll Facebook friend you and we'll make sure that you are added to any round robins that we put out in order to alert activists in particular areas that we're going to do things. And sometimes we miss people, and sometimes not everybody gets a mention because perhaps we're in a rush, or perhaps we think that we'll just concentrate on the people from Glasgow or the people who live in Edinburgh or something like that. So sometimes not everybody is always getting a mention, but we do try our very best. If we know who you are, if we've got some kind of relationship with you, we get you into the inner sanctum, as we call it, the inner circle of the activist crew. Okay. And we understand not everybody can be an activist. And if you can't be an activist, at least you can be a supporter, a financial supporter. For example, a union supporter, supporting us monthly. And we'll put the link up there. Or you could be just a one-off donation, and we need that as well. Because a lot of people are not able to be on the front lines. We perfectly understand that. Lots of people are compromised because of their job or their particular family situation. That's perfectly understandable. So not everybody can come out onto the streets with us, but if you can, and if you want to, please do contact us, and we'll develop a relationship with you. And if you can't, well, at least you can help us there. I see the sign up there. Sign up at aforceforgood.uk/support. Just put your name and email in there, and that's a big start. You'll begin to receive our fortnightly email update. And so, yeah, what we noticed, and which is worth talking about actually, is that the Scottish nationalist side of the demonstration, they concentrated a lot on the technicalities of whether or not Nicola Sturgeon is doing a better job than Boris Johnson. And of course, you can imagine what the answer to that was. But it was all about, has Nicola Sturgeon basically has locked down the country better and faster and quicker than Boris Johnson, which is a very strange debate. And that essentially is the political debate. Who's locked down the country best of all? You know, who's managed to ban enough people from doing this or that? Aren't they wonderful? That's a really strange political debate that the COVID thing has got caught up in, not just in Scotland, but throughout the United Kingdom and to an extent through the Western world. In other words, who is destroying civil liberties better than another person in order theoretically to fight COVID? That's a really twisted political debate, but that's essentially where we are. That's essentially where we are. Whereas we at A Force for Good on Thursday, we took a civil liberties position. We took the position that we should be looking at this idea that we can't have more than 6 people in our house. I mean, that's as British people, one of our mythologies is that a Briton's home is his castle. Okay, well, that's one of the unspoken ideas inherent within the unwritten British Constitution, that personal liberty, that family protection and liberty. And for those sorts of civil liberties to being just walked over, when whether Nicola Sturgeon or Boris Johnson can announce the number of people who are allowed into your house, and can do so without parliamentary debate. Let's think just how far we've come in 6 months. So we took the civil liberty position, but we do note that the Scottish National supporters don't seem to care about that. In fact, the more infractions against civil liberty, the happier they seem to be. And I wonder if that's just because that's where the political debate is at the moment. And so they think they can score political points against Boris by saying that Nicola's locked down the country better than Boris. Maybe if there was no Nicola Sturgeon, if there was no devolution and it was just Boris Johnson making all the edicts, maybe they would have a different point of view. Maybe then they would seize on the civil liberties angle. Maybe then they would say, how can Boris, dictator, apparently be telling us all these things? So maybe the political debate would have been changed if there had been no devolution, if there was no Scottish Parliament, if there was just one British government making these mandates. Perhaps the whole situation would be different. You have to wonder about that. So, yeah, no proper parliamentary process, really, either in Holyrood or in the mother of all parliaments, which is a crying shame to switch on the television and see like 8 people or something like that sitting in a chamber that should have 650 people roundabout sitting in it on a regular basis or standing about at the sides. You really realize, well, we're not even being governed, basically. We're just listening to these edicts. And we're entering a very strange political period. Don't know how it's all going to end up at the moment. Yeah. And Dorothea says, our work on Thursday would encourage the silent majorities to speak out and support unionists. Absolutely. And even as we say, if the silent majority has to continue to be silent, they can at least support us, even if they can't speak out. They can support us through the various links that we're put in. Robert says, love from Galashiels. Good stuff. Hope it's nice down there. It's a beautiful day up here in the great British city of Glasgow. And Richard says it's banning people from being economically productive too. That's what it seems to be doing. It's definitely banning people, especially the hospitality industry, especially the tourist industry, especially things that we just have in our daily life, which brings us on to some good letters that I saw on that particular matter. Somebody writing here in the Daily Telegraph on the 11th of September saying, I used to meet my friends in the pub on Friday night. Now I haven't seen them for 6 months. I went to meetings of 3 societies which have not met for the same length of time. I am awaiting treatment for medical conditions which is on hold until the COVID panic is over. I am 86. I used to think that losing the will to live was just a figure of speech, but now I know how it feels. And you know what? He is very eloquent when he says that, but there are so many people who are just finding that their lives are problematical these days because of this unnecessary, which is got to the stage now it's unnecessary. For the first 2 weeks, people were saying, yes, fine, we'll flatten the curve, no problem, not a big imposition. But then it became flattening the curve to nobody must die of COVID ever. But of course, people continue to die. And another report here, and I thank the person who sent this to me in the Daily Telegraph, non-virus deaths at home on rise as killer illnesses go untreated. And incredible data here that says that from the Office of National Statistics, that more than 6,700 extra deaths in homes, people's personal homes, across the UK have been recorded in the last 2 months, of which just 203 involved COVID. So a lot of people are dying. Many more people are dying as a consequence of the COVID lockdown. This is as clear as day, and that report was on the 3rd of September. The statistics show deaths from other causes soaring amid concern that millions of patients have gone untreated for killer diseases. How absolutely astonishing and horrible. And another one from the Telegraph, problem drinking has almost doubled since start of lockdown. Well, that's really no surprise. All of these things are going to get worse. Crazy times, says Richard. The SNP has become hardline under Sturgeon. Liberty isn't an issue for them. That's certainly true, and we can look, as he says, at the Named Person Act and also at the Anti-Free Speech Bill, which they're attempting to bring through Holyrood. Now, they have published these submissions for that anti-free speech law. They call it a hate law. We call it the anti-free speech law. And you can see those submissions. We've got a link that we can post there in the comments thread, please. And a force for goods comment is one of the best in there. Most of the comments from most of the groups are just going along with it or objecting to bits of it, whereas we're taking a very fundamental objection to a lot of it. And you can see our submission. It's actually 4th from the top. It should be at the top if the person assembling that list knew how the alphabet works. But we can still be seen there at number 4 on the list, 4th from the top. And just the last thing to say about the COVID carry on is the role of the police throughout the United Kingdom on this. And a fellow has written a letter to the Telegraph on this. He says, when I joined the police 27 years ago, I had to memorize the 9 principles of policing, which haven't changed since the time of Robert Peel. None of them refers to enforcing government health public policy. One could suggest that might come under the duty to protect life, but by that argument, police officers should be also preventing people from driving cars, riding motorcycles, smoking tobacco, drinking alcohol, and eating fatty foods, all of which are more likely to kill you than COVID. And that's certainly true. Anyway, that's the COVID carry on. One final thing to say about that, though. Oh my goodness me! I read this article. 500,000 Scots joined the app for tracing contacts. Now, for those of you who might not know, an app is something that you can download onto your mobile phone, and it works via satellite, and it can trace your every move. And when I say trace your every move, I mean it can trace my movement from here to here. I mean, it's just bang on. It's some people would say it was frightening. And what this does is, if you're sitting in a bus, for example, and your app is buzzing away in the background, and there's somebody sitting across from you who's got the same app in his or her phone, then those phones are, to use the phrase, talking to each other. They're in connection with each other. And maybe there's another person a couple of seats down who's also got that app on his phone. And those phones are recording the fact that they're all together. It's not necessarily recording your name or anything like that. It's just the phones that are in touch with each other. So if this person then goes to the hospital, gets a positive test, they call it a case, which is actually nothing to be particularly worried about because it says you've got the immune antibodies in your system. But nevertheless, you're recorded as a positive case. What will then happen is that app will send a message to the person who was sitting over there 2 weeks ago on the bus, to the person who was sitting down the front, a few feet in front of you on the bus, saying that in the last 2 weeks, you were in close contact with somebody who has now had a positive case. You, man over there, woman down there, you should self-isolate for 14 days. Now, it won't necessarily know your names, although I think they could probably trace your names from the mobile phone contract, but it's contacting your phone as such. It's not contacting Joe Bloggs. But if it wants to contact Joe Bloggs, the authorities will be able to see Joe Bloggs as the owner of that phone. So it's basically just a way that the phone not only will follow you around with every pace that you take, the satellite in the sky following you around, but also it will tell you that you have to quarantine yourself. Now, this is just that 500,000 Scots should subject themselves to that. That's actually an amazing sociological fact, which I'm going to say 5 years ago, people would not have accepted. People would not have accepted that just 5 years ago. I don't know if they'd accepted it 9 months ago. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's almost like imprisoning yourself, deliberately imprisoning yourself. So it's a remarkable sociological fact that, and I don't want to know, if I'm sitting on a bus, I don't want to know what guys next to me have got. In the old days, not very long ago, I used to sit on the last bus out of Glasgow city centre every Friday or Saturday night with people sitting next to me, coughing, sneezing, choking, vomiting, bleeding. I don't need to know to panic about that. I mean, the guy might have leprosy for all I know, Ebola. I do not want to be told what he's got. And I don't actually care. I'm just going to try to live my life and walk about in close proximity and sit in buses rubbing shoulders with complete strangers, because that's just called living a life normally without being completely neurotic about it. So yeah, I don't need to know. And if you do need to know, then you're going to subject your life to constant worry. It's going to be constant worry. Oh my goodness, 2 weeks ago I sat on a bus and somebody down the front had a cold. Now that's extra hassle that you don't need in the modern world. At least some of us don't need it. It appears 500,000 Scots are quite happy to worry themselves sick about things like that. It's really weird. Really weird. Anyway, moving on. As many of you know, last week we spoke about the Henry Dundas statue. We said that it was the SNP and the BLM movement in Edinburgh are trying to desecrate the statue with an irreverent plaque which is lying about his history. And that planning application process has ended, and I'm just about to tell you how it ended. Jonathan's wondering how many of these apps are successful. Yeah, some people don't know to what extent it works anyway, but I mean, technology is pretty good, and they can get it to work in time. Richard says people have become lemming-like. Many people have, unfortunately. Yeah. So the planning application for this irreverent lying plaque finished last night at midnight on Friday night. Now, for the 2 or 3 weeks that the planning application was going through, the comments against it were losing by about 2 to 1. And then we and others promoted the idea of registering your objection. And on Friday morning, the objections were in fact in the lead. But by yesterday afternoon, the Edinburgh SNP and the BLM people had rallied, and it did finish it finished with 1,004 objections to this plaque, which is good, but 1,285 in support of the desecration by irreverent hands. So we caught up, and we certainly narrowed the gap. And basically, that's almost even Stevens, to be quite frank with you. So hopefully that will be taken on board. But as we've said, the way that they have phrased it is an absolute travesty and slander against a great Scotsman and against a great Briton. And it does make us wonder about the absolute state of the Edinburgh SNP. It's astonishing. It's astonishing, quite frankly. And it's simply not true. Just lies and nasty lies. Because, as we've said in our article, Dundas is a hero, which we can put up there. Basically, he got his abolition through the House of Commons, but he failed to get it through the House of Lords through no fault of his own. So why are they blaming him for not succeeding in getting it all the way through Parliament? He, as Home Secretary, did what he could, and he got it through the House of Commons, which was an amazing thing back in those days, considering the number of MPs who would have business interests in the Caribbean. So he actually moved the debate on abolition forward. But they're saying totally illogically that he didn't, and that he was responsible for the enslavement of hundreds of thousands of Africans. Just complete lies, ahistorical nonsense. And somebody put in a really good comment, which I'm going to read out. This person said, it's unnecessary, it's politically slanted, and it adds nothing to our objective knowledge of the man or the times he lived in. It's written out of spite and bending the knee to a political fad. It reads like it was concocted by a student magazine, and it will only encourage hate for the statue and further demands for it to be pulled down, or incite impressionable people to vandalize it. And I like this. It's a disgrace for international tourists to see what self-loathing exists in our capital city, rather than pride in the era which shaped our present day built architecture. And isn't it so ironic, or perhaps isn't it so typical, that the people who have got that dislike and self-loathing of the Scottish past are in fact the Scottish National Party? Isn't that interesting? You would think that the Scottish National Party, of all parties, would be trying to defend a Scotsman's honour. But oh no, they bend the knee to a political fad because they are essentially just ignorant of history and ignorant of politics and just ignorant of reality when you get down to it, how reality is created. And many of them don't know any better, like the youngsters that get involved in with that sort of stuff. They just don't know any better. I'm attacking the SNP Council, the people who are bringing this in. I mean, the BLM people can be forgiven for just not knowing anything about even how to tie their shoelaces, for crying out loud. And hopefully in time they'll learn those things. But the SNP Council has had plenty of time to learn. You know, they're older people. They should understand how reality works, but they don't. And that's a crying shame, quite frankly. Oh, goodness me. And because there was another thing going on, and this is like the academics as well. Okay, this is like a mental virus that infects everybody. Forget COVID. It's the mental virus of insanity that seems to be sweeping people who should know better. And there's a chap called David Hume, who is a famous Scotsman in the 18th century. He was one of what's called the thinkers of the Scottish Enlightenment. Now, the Scottish Enlightenment was probably a little bit of a reaction against Scotland's sort of religious, the domination perhaps of religion in Scotland. And so it was a bit of a reaction to that from a humanist and rationalist point of view. But what it basically seemed to concentrate on, as far as I can understand it, is, according to Wikipedia, spoke about the importance of human reason, okay, combined with a rejection of any authority that could not be justified by reason. Anyway, big on the intellectual arguments, whether faith-based or not, big on the intellectual arguments. And so he was a big thinker, and he was very influential at the time. And there's a statue was recently put up on the Royal Mile to David Hume. Now, the modern day, well, basically what's happened is in Edinburgh University, one of the towers, just a tower block, concrete tower block from the 1960s, it's called the David Hume Tower. And they've changed that name because they found out that David Hume wrote a letter to a friend back in 1766, advising a patron to invest in a slave plantation in Granada. Okay. And he also wrote a line in a book about national characteristics about Black people, which is perhaps less than complimentary. But really, those are the two things that they've decided. His entire work in the Enlightenment apparently doesn't count anymore because of those two minor infractions, essentially. And that's academics. And how ironic that they should do that to the Scottish Enlightenment man, the man of all names in Scotland who was forthright in promoting the importance of reason and rationality and logic. That they should do that to him is it's a condemnation, really, of modern day Scotland, but it is of a piece with Humza Yousaf's anti-free speech law, which again goes against the principles of reason and logic and rationality. And so what we've got today is an establishment in Scotland that is actually, although they wouldn't ever say it, they're actually rejecting much of the Enlightenment principles, and they're going back to rejecting the Enlightenment principles, and they're going back to much more fundamentalist attitudes to things, which brook no disagreement at all. And one or two people, thankfully, have been saying how silly this is. And Scotland, one of Scotland's leading historians, Tom Devine, has also pointed out. He said that in the year of David Hume's reported letter on the plantations, there's no evidence that any groups in Scotland even opposed slavery in the colonies. The surge of abolitionism and widespread horror at man's inhumanity to his fellow man only came later. And it came, as we've just been talking about, with people like Henry Dundas trying to get an abolition bill through Parliament, but unfortunately failing. Hume was a man of his time, no better and no worse than any other Scot. By the criterion of this stupid decision, the whole of Scotland in that period deserves moral condemnation. Absolutely, absolutely. Everybody prior to 1997 could be accused, basically, of those sorts of infractions. No question about it. In the United Kingdom, everything. I mean, Robert Burns even accepted a job in a slave plantation, which he chose not at the end of the day to take up. But he had accepted it, and he had bought his ticket. And then he decided, I'll just stay here and write poetry. Might be a lot easier. But by that criteria, maybe we should just get rid of Robert Burns as well. Seems absurd, but why not? Because that's what we're being. That's the logic of what they're saying. And you know what? At the end of the day, whether he was a good, bad, or indifferent, somebody sent me another wee letter here about Walter Raleigh. And in St. Margaret's Church in Westminster, there's a plaque commemorating Sir Walter Raleigh, who, even in his own lifetime, was a controversial character. The last line says, quote, "Reader, should you reflect on his errors, remember his many virtues, and that he was mortal." And this person says, perhaps this should be put on every statue in the country, and let that be an end to all this revisionist nonsense. And there's a picture of Walter Raleigh as a child sitting, thinking about getting out on a boat and exploring the world. And what a strange life he had, Walter Raleigh, because he was one of the greatest Britons, big explorer, big pioneer, set up the first 2 colonies in the North American continent on Roanoke Island in 1858 and 1857. He's reputed with having brought the potato back. He explored the world. He did so much for Great Britain, but he still ended up getting his head cut off. Unfortunately, by our great man, James VI, who invented this flag. But James VI probably had been put into a position where he had to chop off Walter Raleigh's head because the Spanish insisted upon it. Because James VI had previously, when Walter Raleigh had been sentenced to death, James VI commuted the sentence. But then Walter Raleigh went and he did some fighting with the Spanish, which upset them. And the Spanish must have had some kind of lever that they could pull. And unfortunately, they insisted that James VI carry out the beheading. So, you know, Great Britain, but still ends up with his head chopped off. What does that tell you? That's the risk if you do things in life. You know, if you do things in life, you're going to upset some people. The best way, if you don't want to do anything, is just stay in bed. And that way, you never make a mistake and you never upset anybody. But you also don't have a life. So it's better, I think, to be that buccaneer sort, the buccaneer Britons, of which Walter Raleigh, Francis Drake, people like them were, and just take risk, just be risky, you know, and just go for it. And maybe they should have an app for that. You have sat on a bus next to somebody who's unfortunately got their head chopped off. You're going to be next. You better make a run for it. That's probably what they would have had in those days. Hopefully we won't be getting back to those days. So, yeah, Walter Raleigh, which brings us on nicely as well to looking at some of the comments here. Yeah, fire in a comment, folks, either below the video or above the video. And also fire in any comments if you still want to hear on Facebook. Good to see you all watching. Chris says, many thanks, keep up the good work. We certainly will. Good. Somebody's saying, YouTube video is awesome. Keep it up. Thank you. We will, and we've got good numbers of viewers. As we say, we need to get the viewing hours up. And here's a way that you can help us get the viewing hours up. We need to, in any 12-month period, we need to have had 4,000 hours viewing for us to be able to be monetized, which means they put wee adverts along the bottom, and our organization gets some cash for that, and that helps the cause. In order to be monetized, we need 4,000 hours viewing. So we've got a great channel there, youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. Click on there. There's over 175 videos. Just click them on, watch them, just leave them running even. But just get those hours of viewing up. And there's so much that we've said in these videos. So much that we've said. Another thing that we're going to say just now is the positive case for the union. You know, we were making that positive case on Thursday night with our thin red line, the positive case for the union. And I was minded of an interview with Nicola Sturgeon, and we've got a link there. It was in the Daily Express. I think it was about 3 years ago. And it was with Andrew Marr, and he said, was there a no campaign that you would have been worried about, to Nicola Sturgeon? And she goes, yeah. And no campaign that talked about the great things about being British, the positive campaign. And then she says, I mean, I could have made a better fist of that than those who were doing it. And that is the campaign that I think we would have been much more troubled by, but they never ever got their act together to do it. Well, A Force for Good has got our act together to do it. And we summarize some of the positive elements here in our wee book for the Union. Stick up a link there, please, for the wee book for the Union, and you can watch that. You can read that. Perfect bound. It's only 56 pages. Takes you an hour to read. Gives you lots of really good condensed knowledge and information, taking us from the history to the present to the future, making a better Britain. A wee book for the Union. And of course, if you want to do activism, then every family and every home needs a copy of King James's flag, the Union Jack. And this is our 3x2 flag, which we've got specially made. And it's got an open hem where you can put in a pole and you can fly it, or you can take it to activism, because the days are approaching when we're going to need more activists, and all activists should have at least one Union Jack and know how to fly it properly as well. When you hold it in your hands, you want to be showing the thick, broad stripe there should be in your right hand. It goes along the hem to the top where the thick, broad stripe is, and you hold it in your right hand like that. That's how to present it properly to the viewer. Whether or not that will be reversed actually in the YouTube broadcasting, I don't know. Sometimes that might happen. The actual camera might reverse that, but nevertheless, the thick broad stripe, the thick broad white stripe in your right hand. And of course, with winter coming, everybody needs a Union Jack umbrella. Okay, a Union Jack umbrella again from our shop. So please go to aforceforgood.uk and you'll see shop along the top. Good. Well, this week in British history, today, the 19th of September, is British Food Fortnight begins. Okay, and this is a campaign to get people to eat British food, and we do that a lot here in Scotland. We always seek out British branded products. If it's got the Union Jack, fantastic, we buy that. So British Food Fortnight is from today, 19th of September, to the 4th of October. So let's ensure that when we go to these supermarkets, we buy some British produce, because British is best. Also on the 19th of September, back in 1917, George V held a royal investiture, which is to say an awards ceremony at Ibrox, the football park here in Glasgow. And this was the first royal investiture in Scotland in more than 100 years. On the 20th of September in 1973, the English sculptor who created the monument of Robert the Bruce, that big monument at Bannockburn, his name was Charles Dorville Pilkington Jackson. He passed away. And it's interesting, he also created the statue of the British soldier outside Ayr County Council, which is a really nice statue. Oh, it's a fantastic statue. So it looks like a British paratrooper, but it's not, it's the local regiment. Yeah, that's right, it's the local regiment. He also created that one. On the 20th of September in 1854, the British and French defeated the Russians at the Battle of Alma. And there's a famous painting, Alma, Forward the 42nd Highlanders, which is on display on a staircase at the Kelvin Grove Gallery in Glasgow. On the 21st of September in 1914, Lawrence Binyon's poem For the Fallen was published. That's the one that goes, "They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning we will remember them." That was first published on the 21st of September, 1914. Back last year, on the 21st of September, we had a street stall in Argyle Street, and I remember it very well because the highlight for us was this lovely lady tourist from Taiwan who said to us something that I've never forgotten, a memorable line that we won't forget and which we've using. She said, quote, "Scotland without England and England without Scotland would be like eating with only one chopstick." Scotland without England and England without Scotland would be like eating with only one chopstick. And that was some fantastic wisdom that she gifted to us that day, which was we've never forgotten that one. On the 22nd of September in 1989, a terrible attack upon the British when 11 Marines were murdered in Deal Barracks, and unfortunately nobody has ever been charged with that abominable crime. On the 24th of September 2016, Sidney Lewis passed away. Now, who was Sidney Lewis? Sidney Lewis was the youngest British soldier in World War I. And what age do you think he was? 16? No. 15? No. 14? No. 13? No. 12. Okay. Somehow he must have been a tall lad for his day. He enlisted at age 12 after, no doubt, didn't tell his mum or anything like that. And he was sent to the Somme, and he fought on the front for 6 weeks. And it took his mother to discover where he had gone and sent his birth certificate to the War Office and demanded his return. And of course, he was discharged at age 13. But 2 or 3 years later, he re-enlisted in 1918 when he was old enough, and he served with the Army of Occupation in Austria, and then he served in bomb disposal in the police in World War II, and he ran a pub in East Sussex, and he died in 1969. So that's Sidney Lewis. There's a story about him. We'll stick that up as well in the comments. And on the 25th of September 1915, the Battle of Loos began in France and lasted until the 14th of October. And 21 VCs were won for bravery. And we always think about the Scotsman Daniel Laidlaw, who won it for rallying the troops with his bagpipes. And for bravery, also a Gurkha, Culbeer Thapa, won it. And Culbeer Thapa has featured on a first-class stamp, featured on the first-class stamp in May 2015. So interesting week in British history. And of course, what we always do is we, every day on our Facebook page, we will tell those stories because we want to recall to memory the British past in order that we understand where we are today, in order that we can move forward sensibly. And we find these interesting, quirky, moral boosting stories, really, in order to keep the British end up. That's such important work. Avril says, hello from Surrey. She's got a wee book. Great, interesting, and educational read. Tremendous. Thanks, Avril. Thanks. You can get your wee book, folks. If you've not got it, every British home should have it, because a lot of people aren't properly conscious of the United Kingdom. A lot of people in other parts of the UK will say, well, what does it matter if Scotland goes? What does it matter if they leave? Well, it matters, because there'll be no United Kingdom left anymore. I mean, the world would be upturned completely. Not just Britain upturned, the world, because the world needs Britain to be together. As we always say, sail on, O ship of British state. Sail on, O Union, strong and great, for humanity with all its fears, with all its hopes for future years, is hanging breathless on thy fate. You know, this isn't just a little thing for Scotland to be concerned about. This is a United Kingdom-wide issue. What is the future of our United Kingdom going to be? Is it going to be one of growth, productivity, and general cohesiveness and general solidarity? Or is it going to be one of angry desperation and destruction and separation? And that would be a terrible dissolution, a terrible thing for it to happen to the world. And I'm not sure enough people grasp that yet, but it's certainly the job of a force for good to ensure that people can understand what fire we're playing with here and how badly things could go just for everybody throughout the United Kingdom. So on that message, it's coming up now to 2 o'clock. I want to say thank you very much to everybody who's watched. Please go to aforceforgood.uk, click on the shop, get your merchandise there, get your wee book, please. If you appreciate the work that we do, please do become a monthly union supporter. We do need people from as little as £1.15 a week, which works out over 52 weeks as £5 a month. For £5 a month, you can really make a difference for us. So please do become a union supporter if you can. £5 a month minimum. The average that people give is £8, but it's entirely up to you. And entirely, you can give less than £5 as well if you want. And if you'd rather not sign up monthly, click on aforceforgood.uk/donate to, the numeral 2, and just give us a one-off, £5 or a tenner, whatever you can afford. It all goes into activism. We run very frugally and we run very, very cheaply. So on that note, it just remains for me to say thank you very, very much for watching. We'll be back next week. This has been our 25th consecutive Saturday street stall. 3 of those were outside broadcasts, but it'll be our 26th next week. Please tune in. We'll see how this YouTube thing has worked. If you've got any feedback, please do leave it in the comments below the video or below the comments on our link on our Facebook page. Ladies and gentlemen, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the Queen.